morning crust. It's a great day to be a bread brother.
Ugh, mornings are not my jam. Or jelly.
Oh, come on. Stop loafing around.
I just woke up feeling hollow inside.
Psst, just grab one of the new Morning Uncrustables sandwiches, like Bright-Eyed Berry or Up and Apple, filled with 12 grams of protein and tons of deliciousness. Crust, what are you eating?
It's just granola, not even yogurt.
No crust, no fuss. Uncrust your mornings.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
I had that dream again. My small business needs to hire, but I don't use LinkedIn, and I hire wrong. So then I'm doing IT, and when I go to plug the servers in, they become sentient, and they won't let us access our network unless we forward their chain emails and memes to more and more and more people, and then I wake up.
Don't let hiring nightmares ruin your dreams. LinkedIn Jobs' new AI assistant finds and invites best-fit candidates to apply, so you can discover talent you may have missed. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/quality. Start hiring today with LinkedIn.
Welcome to Safe Room, your twice-weekly source for horror gaming discussions, coming to you every Monday, and, as always, proudly part of Bloody Disgusting's Bloody FM podcast network. I'm your host, Jay Krieger.
And I'm the other one, Neil Bolt.
And Neil, a very happy New Year to you, my friend. How was the holiday break for you?
Happy New Year to you as well. Yeah, it was chaotic, as it always is with children. And then there was that wonderful liminal space between Christmas and New Year, and now it's the bare stark reality of January.
Well,
hey, things could be worse, right?
Sure. Well, I don't have children myself yet, but I still, trying to navigate multiple visits with all sorts of family members and trying to get things, squared away in that regard. Touching all my bases, if you will, in terms of family obligations was plenty hectic on my end as well. But I still made time for some games, as I'm sure you did as well.
Oh yeah, a wide variety of things. Like, as we'll probably get into later, there's a kind of mood shift that kind of happens as well around that time of year, where certain things you're just like, nah, can't handle that sort of thing. So you end up playing different things, and but still finding interesting things about them. So yeah.
Yeah, before we dive into sort of like a look at the beginning of the year and just kind of like games that we're looking forward to, and then chatting about, a general grab bag, if you will, of things that we played during the holiday break, we could do some like housekeeping, I suppose, just to kind of like ease into the year for, both listeners that are joining us from, carrying over from last year, and at the same time, hopefully, some new listeners. We've kind of been expanding Safe Room's reach, if you will, over the last year. Some new social platforms, seeing an increase over on Instagram and YouTube, and just generally speaking, more subscribers and followers on like Twitter and X and whatnot. So for those that maybe are joining us for the first time, this is a weekly horror gaming podcast on Mondays. That's when we release our main feed episodes, if you will, which are basically like our long form conversations that cover a variety of games within the horror sphere, and also, the adjacent horror genres and whatnot. And then a change this year, though, is that our indie horror sort of showcase, if you will, episodes, Horror Bites, which previously now are going to be bi-weekly, still on Thursdays, but bi-weekly. So that means later this week, people that want to tune in will be treated to a double dose of Horror Bites, because not only is it going to be bi-weekly, but in that episode, it will be featuring 2 horror games rather than just the one. So you're getting more bang for your buck, so to speak, if you will, in that regard. And so, yeah, main feed episodes will cover a variety of games that we've been playing in a given week. Sometimes it'll be things that are maybe not necessarily new, but, we had a reason to revisit that game or to play that game for the first time. A lot of the time, as anybody that's familiar with Safe Room knows, Neil and I sometimes give ourselves like informal homework assignments or whatnot, things that we've played that we've enjoyed and just kind of like recommend, if you will, to one another. And at the same time, we're our own individual people. We have our own sort of interests in various subgenres and series and things. So it just is nice to kind of like approach the genre with such an open mind as we do, and covering, things that are maybe very well beloved. Naturally, Resident Evil 9 is going to be coming out next month, but at the same time, we play things that are like on the fringe corners of genre. So I think that it's really great having those Monday episodes where we kind of just get to have a bit of a more general approach to horror, whereas on Thursdays with Horror Bites, as I said, that's going to be more of the sort of like bite-sized experiences, whether it's single serving or single sitting horror rather, or if it's like a game jam entry, something that is unpolished, or sometimes even a demo. So yeah, you guys can be sure to check us out every Monday, and then on Thursdays, those episodes of Horror Bites will be bi-weekly and whatnot. And naturally, anybody that's joining us for the first time, if you listen to this and you're like, hey, I'd love to listen to some more of this, we have a very lengthy back catalog, given that, February of this year is going to be Safe Room's 5th year anniversary, which is an absolutely wild milestone to hit. I mean, I can hardly believe it. Can you?
No, I mean, I've been on podcasts that have been going that long, but to have made one from scratch, like that's still going 5 years on, like that. Yeah, it's very difficult to keep a podcast going and have the momentum for it. But yeah, I think we do, and it is mad that it was 5 years ago already. And of course, that's punctuated, as we said, by anniversary of Resident Evil again, coming up at the same time as it was when we started, and and a new Resident Evil game to come with it.
Yeah, it's very fitting that we're going to have our anniversary when we get a brand new Resi, and so we'll for our anniversary episode, we're still kicking around some ideas, but you can be assured that it's going to be Resi themed in keeping with the show's history and whatnot. But I guess that's sort of the only last bit of housekeeping is something that I was sort of mentioning actually in my sort of rambling intro here. You can tell I'm very excited to be back in podcasting once again after a lengthy break. There's a lot to cover, but we're going to be taking more of a general sort of like magazine approach is how you and I have been putting it when we had sort of our over the holiday meeting with the show. Whereas, previously with Safe Room for our main feed episodes every Monday, it was covering one game specifically, right? But these days, you and I, we have interests that span all sorts of subgenres of horror and whatnot. And at the same time, like, as has always been the case with the show, like, we're not always playing things that are brand new, right? It's not always about timeliness. However, at the same time, we both have, full-time jobs, responsibilities, and these things. So, like, just because we have some new release doesn't always mean that, we're able to cram the 20, 30, God forbid, 40 plus hours to play something. But in having more of a magazine style approach, we're going to be able to talk about a lot more games in a given episode, while the episodes themselves, will be generally the same length. So, like, to give people an example, for this week's episode, Neil and I both are bringing, sort of like two features, if you will, which are going to be brief discussions where we're going to be talking about a specific aspect of a game that we played over the holiday, approaching that with more of sort of like this unique spin on it, if you will, or sort of like approach. And then after we get through our feature segment, we're going to be going into sort of like a general grab bag back and forth of games that we played over the holiday. So Neil has about 3 games and I've got 3 to 4 games, depending on how time goes. And it'll be kind of just like jumping between a variety of things, and having more variety, I think, is always good in terms of conversation. Because, let's be honest, sometimes you're going to play a game, it's worth mentioning, but maybe we don't have 60 the stuff to say about it. So, we're going to try out this new approach with the show. And, I think we're both very, looking forward to the fact that we'll be able to have a variety of things and have a bit more varied conversations in a given episode. But, you can still expect, for people that, have followed us over from the new year, you can expect our same sort of like approach in covering horror games in general, which is, we're not so much concerned with the scare factor, as we've said ad nauseum, like the genre is so much more than that. So getting to approach horror games with our same sort of like editorial approach, but just more of them in a given episode, hopefully will yield, some very enjoyable and at the same time varied chats.
Yeah, and we will still do episodes that are focused on something, on one particular thing occasionally, if it's obviously significant, like we said about Resident Evil and its anniversary. That will obviously, and being, like we said, our show's anniversary, that will absolutely come up. And yeah, big games will get big talking points. But obviously, as Jay pointed out, games are big most times, and that's not always easy to do right there in the moment. So this allows us to maybe, get stuff out there, talk about games without having to do hour-long episodes on them. Just having them be a part of a wider episode.
Yeah, that's a great point to add there because, naturally, the week that Resident Evil 9 is going to be out, probably not going to have a lot to talk about other than, the inordinate amount of time we're going to be dedicating to that game. So, yeah, we still have naturally that flexibility, right? It's like, yeah, if we don't necessarily have a lot of other things to play, but we've got some major release, that's going to be the brunt of the episode. But we're just giving ourselves a bit more, even more freedom, I suppose, than we already have to chat about whatever comes to mind. But I guess with that housekeeping out of the way and, going into 2026 and thinking about the year as a whole, we thought we would start by just briefly chatting about, a couple of games that we're most excited for in the new year and whatnot. Things that, obviously we're not going to include everything because, wasting time talking about how excited we are for Resident Evil 9 when it's right around the corner. We're naturally looking forward to that. So that's not going to necessarily be discussed. But these are a couple of just like bits and bobs that we're looking forward to in the, in the new year. So Neil, why don't you kick us off? What's a game that you're looking forward to that's coming out hopefully in the near future in 2026?
Well, it definitely is because it got a release date recently, and probably the first time I'd seen it re-emerge since it was announced, which was John Carpenter's Toxic Commandos, which, is by Saber Interactive, who did the great World War Z game, and this is the combination that excites me about it. It's John Carpenter, who loves video games, involved with a video game, and you have this multiplayer horror pedigree, which gives me confidence that the game could be fun, like that. It is just like World War Z intense, that you are having a co-op-based, assault with zombie-like creatures, and a lot more vehicle stuff. And yeah, I think the name value definitely helps with this, but I don't know, just given that fun factor that has been there with Saber Interactive's multiplayer things, it's one of those I'd like to really sort of get into on when it's out and like really enjoy. I know that there's always the risk with these sort of games that they aren't going to last, and especially when they're relying on other people. But riding that wave, I found, since last year, I really sort of accepted that with games like that. But get in while it's hot, play it, enjoy it for as many hours as you like, and then don't feel bad when it's not got as many people around. You'll play it when you want to, if it's still around, and that's great. But yeah, just getting that initial sort of fun factor out of it is always great. And I don't know, it just looks chaotic in a way that, and again, just John Carpenter being involved in anything at this point, like it isn't just music, is great. And just it seems like it's been a long time coming. We've had him back involved in video games since like the Thing game, which obviously he had a hand in terms of the story.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Is that it's very easy to kind of like not be super optimistic about zombie games at this point and thinking about, another zombie focused game that, especially after like being burnt by something like Back 4 Blood and whatnot. But to your point, like Toxic Commando not only has John Carpenter attached to it, but, and I think this is probably more important in terms of just like being more optimistic about it, is that Saber Interactive is the developer and the publisher's, Focus Entertainment. And, that not only speaks to the success that they had with World War Z, and, I'm getting ahead of myself with something I'll chat about in my grab bag, but like even in playing the new 40K Space Marine 2 game, like they have such a prowess, I think, for making games that both have really strong single and multiplayer components. And at the same time, what is most important in the through line between both World War Z and Space Marine 2, I think, is just their ability to have a staggering amount of, whether it's zombies or whether in the case of Space Marine 2, Tyranids on screen at a single given time captures the overwhelming nature of what you want from a zombie game, right? It was very apparent in World War Z they can make that work. And just like having that sort of prowess, I think, of having really stable games that can have that overwhelming feel that you want in a zombie first-person shooter game is one of those things that I think makes this one that I'm actually really looking forward to as well. And naturally, as you said, John Carpenter being involved can only be a positive thing. So yeah, that's a good shout for a very early sort of like release that's coming this year that has a definitive date. So it's going to be March, I believe, of 2026.
Yeah, that's right. So what about you? Let's hear what you've got in the bag.
So for me, I guess I'll start with the indie side of things. The indie game that I'm looking forward to the most that we actually got a taste of, I believe it was last year or maybe even the year before that, was Tenebris Somnania, which is now, since then, we played the demo all those, a year or two ago. Now it's been picked up by a publisher, New Blood Interactive, and, Erdorf behind, the Faith trilogy even is being involved and being a producer on the game. And so, this game already was notable because of the fact that, we have been very much inundated with point and click horror games, right? That sport this classical pixel graphic art style. But this game takes it one step further in that it is actually bridging the gap between games and film, and that periodically all of the cutscenes in this game are live action and they're being filmed with, as I said, live actors and whatnot. And so you get a brief taste of that in the demo, and the trailers for this are fantastic, but it really is, this type of experience we've never seen before in terms of like bridging that gap in a way that it is a gimmick, but at the same time, it's done and executed on from what we've seen so far in a caliber that we really haven't seen before. It's just so professional looking. It's so disconcerting going from gameplay to then live action. And it really does heighten the scares for, otherwise a presentation of a genre that wouldn't elicit that kind of reaction, because it's, again, this pixelated side-scrolling point-and-click adventure that normally I'd be like, yeah, you can have creepy monsters in that, but it's not going to instill genuine fear. And there's one jump scare in the demo still that I remember that really wouldn't be possible without that approach. And so to know that we're getting it this year, there's no definitive date, is something that I'm quite looking forward to, and is probably my most anticipated game of the year.
Yeah, which is understandable. I think we said before, it's that combination of styles that takes you back to the PlayStation days of just that mix of FMV and gameplay, where it added some sort of flavor, a different context now. But I do think its use as sort of an unnerving aside is definitely powerful. I think it's been showing that it's got to be more than a gimmick, which is exactly what you want to hear about it.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll be getting that one sooner rather than later. But what else were you looking forward to this year?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a few times, including, as you did with the devs, but Reanimal, obviously, is coming soon. And yeah, I mean, what's to say? I think playing through the Little Nightmares games kind of built my appetite up for that one, like that. And I think the slight shift in how it works with this game and how it being a new thing, yeah, there's a fresh intrigue to it, and definitely a sort of evolution of what they've done before, which is, I think they needed to sort of not escape so much the Little Nightmares, but to be free of it and allow it to just go off and be its own thing, which that's happened with the third game getting made by a different developer. So yeah, I mean, and everything we've seen and the gameplay so far has been intriguing and just enough to make me go, ooh, where are we going with this? And given the dark heart of Little Nightmares, and I'm very, very excited to see where they take this story.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially after getting to chat with the developers last year for Horror Bites. I'm just excited to see how they're able to expand on that, brief demo that we got, but already it seems very exciting in terms of like ways that they can continue with what has worked previously for them with the Little Nightmare series, but having some freedom now in doing a new IP, how they're going to kind of like deviate from that, but still using, their very well-established narrative prowess and sort of like gameplay within that sort of flavor of horror, if you will.
Yeah, it's fair enough. So yeah, what else you got?
I think, the other big one for both of us is going to be Ontos from developer Frictional Games. Now, we've extensively covered Frictional's games in the past. Naturally, we chatted with the creative director about The Bunker even back in, a few years ago and whatnot. And we, as we're on record, sci-fi horror is always sort of like our bag. At the same time, this being a game that kind of like almost instills a bit of that identity of The Shining with like a hotel in space, and there's some mad experiments going on there. This was one that was shown off at, I believe it was the Game Awards last year.
Yes.
And that trailer, just like, 90 seconds, give or take. And already it's kind of presented this world that has so many questions, has so many intriguing visuals. And I think that it kind of is bridging the gap between what I would say is like Prey-esque in terms of like having that sense of atmosphere, having it be highly stylized and being evocative of or evoking the history of a place, but at the same time, it seems like a approach to storytelling that only Frictional Games is capable of doing. It's something if anybody is familiar with Soma and the sort of avenues of storytelling and existential dread that comes with that storytelling and whatnot, like people that are fans of that, I think that already this brief look at Ontos is like very indicative of that kind of storytelling. So this is probably, in terms of larger experiences, this is probably my like most anticipated game so far of 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I think my notes were it's a sci-fi horror game set on a moon hotel by Frictional, and it's got Stellan Skarsgård in it. So, yeah, it's like, how could it not be the game I want most? I think the big takeaway is what was done with The Bunker to sort of evolve, the Amnesia series is fascinating, because now we, like you said, Prey there. I mean, Christ, we could be a bit closer to something like that in terms of the structure and how that goes about. And The Bunker's way of approaching storytelling at that point didn't need to be as in depth, because we knew a lot about the Amnesia storyline at that point, and it was just feeding into what we already knew within a new set. But here, this is all fresh, so I like to see how they go back to what they were doing from before that, while still like in a mechanical sense, seeing where they go from what they did with The Bunker.
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing, whether it's going to be the same approach to, emphasis on player freedom in terms of gameplay, or if it'll be more narrative focused like Soma. But yeah, it's the type of thing we're really excited to kind of see how that plays out. And I guess the last thing that I'll mention just very briefly, because we don't know much about it, but that's going to be Hellraiser, which is, Clive Barker's Hellraiser revival, if you want to give the full title, from also Saber Interactive. And this game, it looks the part, which I think is probably the most difficult thing to do in terms of like Hellraiser doesn't really have a lineage in terms of games, right? And, the brief ones that we've gotten, it's like being included by Dead by Daylight is not even something that I really even consider. So to not only see a brief look at this and see that it clearly captures the iconic imagery of Clive Barker's work, and at the same time knowing that it's going to be like a survival horror game and a first-person one at that, it already has piqued my interest and kind of just sold me on that concept alone. Again, don't know much about it, but if there's a developer that I think is going to be able to nail this, it would be Saber. And getting to see them do something that, by all accounts, as far as I know, is much more single-player focused or inter-player focused, will be great to see, because as we've mentioned, Saber has clearly gotten a foothold within multiplayer space and being able to develop those experiences within the horror realm. So getting to see them do something that's survival horror focused in a world that is, actually utilizing the Clive Barker Hellraiser IP in a way that seems very faithful just has me excited. And yeah, I don't have much more to say other than that, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing this.
Yeah, as a sort of aside, the fact that we are getting a few sort of licensed horror games, some in the near future, some in the further future. Obviously, the Alien Isolation sequel at some point, but also the Halloween game from Phonic, which hit and miss, patchy stuff with how they've handled licensed stuff in the past. But yeah, to see single player versions of these licenses are quite welcoming. Like as much as it was nice to have this wave of games based on these great IPs, fantastic. But having them being multiplayer focused and live service focused, it just we've seen with how that's not helped certain games as a result, in the long run. And just if you want them to last, it's better that they are primarily like story based, single player based stuff.
Absolutely. And like I said, we are going to be getting that this year. So we'll, I'm sure, report back on that again, hopefully sooner rather than later. But why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we can dive into, our first sort of like feature segment, if you will, of the year as we get into, some of the stuff we played this hall break, and then we can go our grab bag. But we'll dive into that and much more in a moment. So I'd like to kick things off with, during the holidays, I spent some more time playing a game that we had covered for our Game of the Year coverage, naturally, and that game would be The Seance of Blake Manor, which was, yet another game from publisher Raw Fury, which kind of just like rounded out a phenomenal year for them. But developer Spooky Doorway, while we've been fans of previous games of theirs, like The Dark Side Detective and whatnot, Seance of Blake Manor kind of just like kicks things up to a really phenomenal notch, which is, no wonder that it was part of our Game of the Year coverage and quite high on our personal lists of that matter. But I didn't just spend more time with this game. I actually ended up showing this game to, of all people, my mother during the holiday break. I got to, we were visiting my grandparents. Naturally, my mom, my brother were there. And it was one of those things where, like, I grew up in a house where my father was very against games and wasn't really into games at all. So I never had that connection. And my mom never was into like games, but at the same time, she was more open to me playing them, which always kind of stuck with me. She was almost my advocate to a degree of like, he did this and that, so he can play some games, which I was always appreciative of. But games were never really her thing. However, a major thing about the Seance of Blake Manor is the fact that this is very much like inspired by like an Agatha Christie kind of mystery, right? And so my mother is very into those types of mysteries and watches, all the BritBox mysteries and stuff like that with my father and whatnot. And so I felt fairly comfortable in sort of just like pitching this to her as like, hey, I'm not saying that you need to play this, but you would probably get a kick out of watching me play this. And I think that, again, that's like a testament to just how in-depth the Seance of Blake Manor is in terms of like being a proper mystery that gives the player freedom to explore all of the clues and avenues that this mystery can take. And so it got to the point where like I sat down and basically wanted to give her the tutorial, which is getting through the intro with the first 20 minutes, because it's one of those things where somebody that doesn't play games, you put them down in front of most things and they're kind of like, I don't really know what to do. And so once she watched me play it and understood the concept of interacting with everything comes at the cost of 1 minute of time, a new event occurs every hour and this and that, she felt comfortable enough like actually sitting down and playing it. And so she herself probably had about 20, 25 minutes of just like getting a lay of the land or the manor, if you will. But then she actually like went through the mystery and started interacting with the different branching theories. She made her first hypothesis. She made her first accusation with another character and whatnot. And, she probably only over the course of the 5 days we were spending together for the holiday, like she probably only played 90 minutes or whatever. But I thought that was just so cool that like my mom that doesn't play games could have an interest in this in a way that she normally doesn't and actually sit down and like get something out of that without seeing the end result of the sort of like overall mystery.
Yeah, I mean, I find that quite the same in my household. My wife is very much into the same things. It's like, so she does connect to the puzzles in games like
Hmm.
that. I didn't get to play this unfortunately around her because I think that I would have thought the same. But obviously, Raw Fury is other big game, Blueprints. She was
Mm.
very much involved in like the puzzle solving of that and getting into it, and that is a wonderful thing. Like in viewing games from a distance, where in a game where it's sedate enough that you can sort of take your time, not have to worry about the action on screen, like continuing it in that way. And those are two sort of great examples of it, where you are just, it has that rule set that means you can just sort of sit there, think about a thing, and go, oh, yeah, no, this makes sense. And discussing things
Hmm.
about a game like that, that's the cool thing. Like, as much as, you can class co-op gaming mainly as being teaming up to mow down thousands of zombies, as we mentioned, like that, or whatever. There are games that do have a puzzle element, are co-op based in the traditional sense. But yeah, I think games like that are very puzzle focused and deduction focused
Mm.
are great for like multiple people to sort of play. Like, especially if someone is more of that mind, like that. I mean, for me, I find that such an interesting aside that my wife will be quite into figuring that stuff out in a way that I can't. But it unlocks in me in discussing
Mm.
with her about it, and I'm sure that's how it was for you, where you get like a new sort of perspective on how to like look at these games because as we say, games are made for all kinds of people, and people don't know that there are games made for them
Yeah.
effectively. Like maybe they can't play them in the traditional sense, but
Mm.
given to them in the right context, yeah, they can have just as memorable and an experience as you would, but and have a hands-on experience effectively that they wouldn't have with any other medium, which is fantastic. That's what we like. It goes back to that idea of bridging what board games did, and like tabletop games of how you can get people involved and feeling like they're doing something with it rather than being like a contestant, so to speak.
Absolutely. And, I didn't walk away from this experience with this like delusion of like, oh, she's going to get into games. Not that I even necessarily felt like, oh, I hope she gets into games, but I just thought that to make a game such as this, that so clearly, like at just its base level, right, it
Yeah.
understands how to tell a story and how to utilize genre in that manner, that you could have somebody that's a fan of just mysteries be really into that. And then, that aspect of it, I think just made it so much easier to sell her on the experience because then inevitably she ran into one of the moments when you're exploring the manor, you turn a corner and all of a sudden there's, apparition, if you will. And, that caught her off guard. But at the same time, like the game has such an even head with its utilization of horror that instance didn't like turn her off of it because she's not really into horror either. But it did make it a much more like moody and memorable. That was kind of like the capstone moment, if you will, where and she's like, "Oh yeah, great." So all of a sudden, I understand sort of like how horror can be utilized in non-conventional ways in other genres. Like here, it's about a haunting naturally, but like she's approaching it from just the mystery aspect. And so yeah, I just thought that was so cool. And she didn't even get like that far into the game, like I said, and didn't get the answers that she wanted to like the general mystery of it all. But the one thing that she said was just like, yeah, this like feels like a proper mystery, and having the freedom to approach any aspect of it or approach certain individuals that stood out to her was one of those things that is kind of like fulfilling the fantasy of anybody that watches a mystery and watches enough mysteries, I suppose, where at a certain point they're just like, oh, hey, like I would love to be able to go interview this person first instead. Something they did stood out to me more than whatever direction a show or a movie takes. So yeah, that was kind of like one of those rare moments where I was able to bond over games with one of my parents, which I had never had previously. But I think that further just kind of speaks to like the magic of the Seance of Blake Manor, which is a game that clearly anybody should play based upon our Game of the Year coverage. But
Yeah.
even people maybe aren't super into mysteries should definitely check that out because it does it so well. And giving players that agency.
Yeah, I think its complexity is done in a way that makes it very accessible. I think is the best way to put it, and like, that's a great example of exactly why that's the case.
Absolutely. But you had a game that wasn't necessarily new, but you revisited it over the vacation and had a newfound appreciation for a certain aspect of it. Did you not?
Yeah, it was coming to a conclusion, I suppose, that I'd come to before, but because the fun thing about doing this way now is that I can approach games that aren't horror
Mhm.
and say, well, little things that maybe give you the feelings from horror, within those sort of games. And ironically, it came in something that I was looking to not really have anything intense in. So in that sort of post-Christmas limbo, once everything has calmed down, I was finding it hard to get into anything intense, because just the whole chaos of family and doing all those things like that, you kind of just settle into, I'll do this. And I brought the Switch 2 downstairs because I hadn't really played it in a few months properly. And I'd been playing stuff like Donkey Kong Bonanza, and that was like great. And so really got to playing it again. And I had a save from Stardew Valley on there from a while back. And I thought, why not? I didn't really want to start a brand new game, and it was like a few weeks in. So I thought, why not? Yeah, I'll go back into it. And needless to say, I put many, many hours into it over the last few weeks again. Now, for the uninitiated to this game, there's a flexibility to Stardew Valley. Well, it's like a farming RPG. That means you can just get by doing chill shit like farming, fishing, chatting with the local populace, even though the mayor's an arsehole. But there is a dungeoneering option to it. And the premise of this is quite simple. That you go down into these mines, and with your pickaxe, you break rocks until you find a ladder down to the next floor. And there are monsters there, but you can get particular loot from these rocks and from slaying the monsters. So you can get certain minerals and crystals and certain stuff, particularly from the monsters you fight, whether it be like flying bugs, right down to skeletons and mummies and whatever. Like, it changes floor to floor and into a secondary dungeon that you also come across later. Now, in the first sort of section of the mines, there are 120 floors, I think, and every 5 floors you get a checkpoint elevator, so you can come back and start from that floor next time. But obviously, any floors in between, if you happen to go back up the ladder, you have to leave, and then your progress, so to speak, is reset back to that last marker. So venturing into these mines is like a risk versus reward scenario. With that in mind, because sometimes you just can't help but push on a little further. Because the greed of getting more stuff, the impatience of like trying to get through these dungeons so you get all stuff, even when you've done it before and you know what you're doing, like that, you still don't take it as measured as you should. Now, the thing is, the day is always ticking by in Stardew Valley. Like, time just keeps ticking on, and every action move you do, basically be whether you're swinging your pickaxe or your sword, that's draining your energy. And while you can like chomp down on like pre-prepared meals you've made or whatever forage foods you found, if it's earlier in the game, that could get your energy up a little. Obviously, raw ingredients don't do much as other stuff, and you have a health bar as well to consider, so you're trying to keep both things up. But yeah, the thing is, a seemingly easy run where you've maybe topped your energy up and you can keep going, and you think, I'll just do one more floor, like that, can get quickly complicated, because obviously you don't know where the exit to this floor will be each time, and some stages have like lots of rocks on the floor, so and it's not always a rock. Maybe it's an enemy that comes up and you unlock one there. There are usually multiple ways to get out of a floor, but of course the random nature of it means you could be hitting rocks for a while, taking your energy down, and time is always ticking on. And also, you could get hit a deluge of monsters. Sometimes loads of those will come up, and you have to fight them off or find the escape route out of it. But as I said, the added wrinkle to this is that you can't stay awake after a certain time. So, and even if you do, if you get to bed very late, you have less energy the next day, etc., etc. And if that happens, you collapse where you stand. And while the penalty isn't like all that severe, you lose some items, maybe some money, like that, by someone comes and rescues you, and anonymously in the night, and you get left a note telling you what happened. It's the intensity in those scenarios that can really ramp up quickly. Like for me, I suddenly become very aware of how far down I am, like, and how far from an exit, especially when you're maybe a couple of floors from where you want to be, and you're too far away from like the ladder back up, and the time is running out, your energy's low. It's like, even if I get out of here, and I could probably end up taking a literal dirt nap in the flower beds of the town centre, like, and while that's not as anxiety inducing, it's still like just the sudden way that happens. It's very reminiscent to me of like that sort of survival horror feeling of like, okay, I think I've got everything in hand. I've got all the things I need for this mission out to this section, and I'll be okay. I've got enough bullets. I've got, obviously no bullets here. Catapult maybe, but it always upends itself because, like a survival horror, your own confidence can trip you up. Like that you can, in a survival horror game, you maybe fire a few too many bullets in trying to just take one carefully aimed headshot, and thus, fuck yourself over for later. And here it's the same. It's like, you getting too preoccupied on doing one thing can make you lose track of time, even though it's right there in the corner. It can make you lose track of how much energy and energy supplies you have. And it's in a game that I was trying to be quite chill about, and I didn't really need to go into the dungeon. Like I said, you can just avoid that, but obviously certain things you could only get in a dungeon and like that. And there's this whole subplot to the game of like building up this old place by like giving like offerings to the spirits, like that, and that they basically restore certain parts of town and make Stardew Valley, the town, better. But you have to like bring them certain items in different categories, and unfortunately that's part of it. So it's a compulsion that you kind of need to do that if you want to get that part of the game done, and as such, you end up bringing the stress upon yourself. So I think it's more in the context of it being Stardew Valley that it felt like that again, and because many games of that ilk, you will have something similar, but I don't know. It's the way it feels very disconnected from the rest of the game sometimes, in a good way. Like it feels like it's something that's different to the rest of the town, because you don't really find monsters anywhere else. It is just in these dungeons generally, and and just there's a dread sense to some of the creatures that will come up. Like I said, sometimes you'll get this wave of like a hazy wave of color come over the screen, and then you'll get loads of these like flying bugs. Now, like normally they're like little grubs on the ground, and if you kill them quickly, fine. If you don't, they harden and basically turn into these flying ones that make this horrible like fuzzy noise that as they fly towards you, and it's like, it's that sort of Pavlovian response to run away, like and just get out of it, a situation the minute you hear it. It's not so bad later when you get like bats and stuff, but it is a strange thing, but it reminded me that I had felt like that the first time I'd ever gone through those dungeons as well back in the day, and I'd put many hours into it. It was the first time I'd really done that full dungeon run since then on PlayStation, so it was the first time on Switch, and it was a nice reminder that you can find little moments of horror even in the most serene of things.
Yeah, for somebody like myself that hasn't actually played Stardew Valley, but I think that this aspect that you're talking about with like the dungeons and this sounding like what is probably the most hardcore aspect of the Stardew Valley experience, like that further speaks to something that we've talked about previously on the show that is inherently one of the aspects that we find that could be like a concept of like adjacent horror, which is the survival aspect, right? Of stuff like this, where it adds that layer of intensity. It adds these aspects of, while in this case, like dying might not have these crazy drastic ramifications. At the same time, it adds a layer of intensity to a game that otherwise, its reputation precedes it as being this kind of like chill experience. So the very notion that a game such as that could have this aspect to it, with the dungeons and such, that actually like adds intensity. It adds the notion of danger, where for a majority of the game, as far as I understand, like that's not an aspect of. I think that just speaks to like, the versatility of genre and how like mechanics that could be in subgenres or even just like adjacent genres can kind of like elevate an experience that it might be a facet of the experience that isn't for everybody. However, it certainly sounds like it's an aspect that for more hardcore players such as ourselves, like that could even give more credence to like checking out a game that might be outside your comfort zone, or speaking to not exactly a new game plus, but just like a more hardcore facet of gameplay that opens up once you think you've exhausted the general sort of like content experience, if you will.
Yeah, and when you do get to like the secondary set of dungeons, it's like even harder, obviously. But yeah, it's at that point you're like, yeah, I've got other things on the go. I can take my time with that. So like, but yeah, it's great time. Stardew Valley is just an all timer for me anyway. But
Sure.
yeah, it's been nice to sort of get back into it.
Yeah. Well, knowing that there's that survival aspect is one of those things that probably would make me think more about checking it out, because I don't always go for the lo-fi chill kinds of games, but knowing that there's a bit of challenge to it outside of the sort of like core experience, it speaks to kind of just longevity aspect of it. But do you want to get into our sort of like grab bag of some just bits and bobs we played over the holiday break?
Yeah, that's
All right. Why don't you kick things off? What was one that you made some time for, whether it was something new or something older from your back catalog? What'd you get into this holiday break?
So on the small scale front, because I didn't play much of it, but I mentioned it to you that I played a bit of Disco Elysium. So I touched it, I think, a while back, and never really got into it. Played a few hours now at this time. Again, just juggling so many games. And Stardew Valley, as I said, did end up taking up a lot of my time. But yeah, no, it's like the general vibe of that game in the first few hours is like everything. Like as you've constantly told me, like just there's a complexity to that game that makes it feel more complex than it is, I suppose, in terms of like as a structure. But it comes down to that writing being so good and just so pithy and off, like, and just I do love how free flowing as well it feels to be the kind of character you want the protagonist to be, like that, and just straight down to that intro of like how much of your clothes you're going to wear, like for the rest of this sort of thing. Just I think it goes back to that whole sort of detective thing we've been going on about, and stuff like Lake Manor, where it's probably a reason I wanted to play it again, just because it has a bit of that, detective work to it. And just the voice work, everything about it's like really interesting. Like I said, I just got sidetracked, so I didn't really get into it. Like I said, it's playing certain kinds of games like were very easy in that sort of limbo period, but the fact that I started that at all was quite remarkable.
Yeah.
But did you want me to go through other things I've played first and come to you, or?
I guess I can. Let me just comment real quick on Disco, because that was one that I've been playing like periodically. It's one that I feel like it is such a dense game in terms of like the really, as you said, the fantastic writing, and with the Final Cut version, fully voiced for all the characters and stuff. That's been one game that I've like periodically been going back to when I have, like an hour or two free, and just kind of like getting lost in that world and kind of exploring the politics of it. And the sort of like, it's very familiar structurally, but at the same time, it goes in so many interesting avenues of like RPG and the introspection and the writing and whatnot. It's just such a fantastic game there. If you want, what else did you get into though during the break?
Just a couple of smaller things, like digging the game about digging a hole, which obviously was like quite popular last year as games go. And I mean, that's what it says on the tin to begin with, and I don't know, I kept seeing it come up as being horror, like, and I was thinking, oh, okay, so where does this horror stuff go in?
Mm.
I will say, like, initially, like, it's the general, like, moorishness of, like, upgrading your stuff, like, digging down, getting, selling the ores, upgrading your equipment, digging further and further down this hole in the garden, like, is really compelling, like that. And then you pretty much get to the upgrades before you get to like the main point. I think if you do well enough, you've basically got a lot of stuff unlocked in it. The digging gets easier and easier. But yeah, then it has this big like revelation moment of like when you break through the bottom of this hole into a wider cavern, and the things you find down there basically. Which, like if you know, you probably know or you don't know that, but I'm not going to go spoiling it for anyone. For me, that's kind of where the game lost me, ironically, which is like, as much I didn't much care for the new intrigue until like, well, the initial seeing, seeing it was like interesting initially, but after that, I was like, no, I kind of preferred it when it was just a game about digging a hole, like, just like, which is saying something. I mean, it feels like a lot of the things we praise quite well about horror bites, in terms of like, something turns into something else, sort of like short experience, but made longer by the digging being a few hours of digging. And yeah, I don't know. For me, it just didn't kind of pay off at that point, and yeah, which is an odd thing to bring it up as being, it is a horror game, I guess, in the way it goes, but yeah, I didn't like it as a horror game.
Yeah, I think that for me, like from what I've seen of it, like it would be more about the mystery, right? The notion of like figuring out what's going on. But it sounds like if once you kind of like get the answer that you're looking for, maybe that's when it starts to like kind of not fall apart. That's a bit dramatic, but yeah, just sounds like maybe that's where the allure ends.
Kind of feels like a streaming game, like just let's discover what happens together and like have a what the fuck moment sort of thing, which is understandable. But the other thing, the last thing I'll bring up is probably the thing I've played the most out of these things is Ball X Pit, which by Kenny Sun, published by Devolver Digital. The best way you can put it, it's Breakout meets Vampire Survivors, and that is what it is. Basically, this whole backstory about like there's a whole meteor that leaves a giant pit, and adventurers go down to the pit to sort of get riches and take on like a. So like it's the setup makes it look like one of those sort of endless runners in the sense of like you just have a straightforward path forward. Your character at one end basically shooting like the waves of enemies as they come from the top. They fill out the screen in block form. You basically have to destroy them before they get too close, but they start attacking you, and you can't really fight back in a melee sense. So yeah, it's about that. And then each time you do these levels, there's like a couple of mini bosses, then a main boss, and once you've done a run, you get whatever rewards, characters level up. You then go back to like home base, which is like a little bit of city building you do, where you just like can mine resources to basically build better stuff that ups your stats and gives you new characters and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a weird mix of things, but it's really, really compelling because everything is based on this whole sort of breakout style of like, your shots bounce off the walls. They have different like elemental abilities and you can fuse them together as you go on, and all that stuff is randomized, so you don't know what you'll get necessarily on any given run. You can do re-rolls, obviously, but they cost money. And yeah, so and each character has some sort of quirk to them that makes that job harder. So like for some they'll throw these balls out that will not do much damage going forward, but when they bounce off the back and they hit enemies in the back, they do like double damage or something. Or there'll be someone who has like double the amount of like projectiles, but they do half amount as damage, but they can go in two different directions. So like, you can do all sorts of cool things with that. And yeah, it's like, so levels, they tell you from the outset that they're about 15 minutes long. You can do 3 speeds as well. So if you want to do it a bit quicker, you can do it a bit quicker. But yeah, it's really, really Moorish in terms of like, I mean, it's got a really cool soundtrack as well, which is like one of those that really makes a nice thumpy noise in terms of like, and just it's very rhythmic as well, which suits that style. So it's like playing ping pong against waves of enemies effectively, and just spraying them with like fireballs and poison balls, and there's a lot of like great monster design and great, like even like the different kinds of balls you get, like great fusions, and yeah, it's just a really well designed game. And like the way it opens up is fantastic. You think you've got like the gist of what it's doing, but like new levels bring new ideas and new things, and yeah, like such a simple idea. And while you could look at it and go, oh, it's just this, and this, like it's that combination of things that makes it such a cool game to play.
Yeah, this really seemed to be one of the, best examples. I haven't gotten around to this one yet, but it seemed to be yet another great example of like applying roguelite elements to very untraditional sorts of, gameplay formats, or melding of gameplay formats, right? I think that this is one of those games that I'm sure. Did you play this on your Steam Deck?
No, this is on PS5 for me.
Oh, PS5. Okay. But my point was going to be like, this seems like one of those games where it would be perfect for like a Steam Deck, right? But
oh yeah, I mean, I almost bought it on my Switch because I was like, yeah, I might buy this again because it's like a 10 or something. So yeah, it's just it does feel like Moorish in that regard.
Yeah, and like the overall sort of like hectic arcade style gameplay, but then having that sort of like meta aspect to it of like thinking about your build and whatnot, and how that can kind of like prolong either a current run or thinking about like future runs and developing new strategies from experimentation. Just kind of like, again, speaks to being able to take these sort of like RPG style elements and applying them to very unconventional gameplay formats. And also like, it seems like there's like base building and stuff. So like, again, this just seems like one of those games that at the end of the day, like, is taking a big risk, but it's clearly indicative of developers that like understand the genres they're melding, rather than it just kind of like doing so for the sake of it. It really, seems like it nailed that kind of like addictive spin, if you will, of blending those genres. So that's one that I definitely want to check out in the near future.
Cool. So yeah, that's my lot. What about you? What did you get up to?
Yeah, so that actually is like the perfect sort of primer for a game that, had I played it sooner in the year, it definitely, without question, would have been on my Game of the Year list. That being Rock and Road Monsters Are Coming, which was, again, talking about a banner year for publisher Raw Fury. This one was from developer Ludogram. And I'd described this one to you off air as being basically like, the premise is Immortal Engines, right? That film, it's a book series, and then Peter Jackson was the producer on the movie that didn't end up being very good, but the gist of it being basically these massive mobile moving cities, right? And so the premise of this game is that you have this town hall that's on wheels that is basically progressing through a map, and enemies begin to swarm the town hall. Now, the player's job is not to control the city, but to control the hero that can stand on top of the city, but can also leave the city during the course of a match or course of a level. They're going to run around and either attack enemies to get XP that can then be used to level up their city. Once you hit certain levels, it allows you to build a new structure or a tower, basically. And those towers can either be defensive towers, so like archers. It can be mortars. It could be frost explosions to slow enemies, or it could even be like a flamethrower. But the player needs to kind of like discern what's more pressing for them. Is it that they want to level up their city to build more towers, or are they going to spend that time to go harvest resources? If you harvest enough wood and bring it back to your city, it upgrades the attack speed of all of your towers. You can also go get gold, which lets you build towers at one of the 3 like milestone markers in a given level that gives you a reprieve. Or are you going to go get stone, which then like allows your structure to replenish its health. Or you can find items in the environment that power up your hero, make them hit harder, make them attack faster, harvest faster, move faster, and so forth. And you can get like different items periodically that give them new defensive and offensive and harvesting capabilities. And yeah, along the lines of Ball Pit, which we were talking about, like this seems very similar in that it presents you with this very like arcade style of gameplay. However, the player really gets to dictate, a layer of strategy to everything that's being done. This like roguelite element. You get to develop various sort of like combinations of towers. Some of them are offensive, defensive, as I said, but also some of them will boost various abilities. Some towers increase damage output. It'll let you basically like create or generate resources periodically and whatnot. And there's also a variety of like town halls that give you different abilities. Like the variety of town halls is really cool because, some of them start out and it's like, oh, you have more health maybe. But then there's also one where it's like buildings cost double to build, but you get twice the amount and they mirror each other wherever you place them, an attachment to your town hall. Now, the big thing with the town hall is that periodically you're going to come up against like environmental blockers that need to be cleared, like roots and things like that. So the basically like juxtaposition of the towers in relation to the core of where the town hall is really important. Because if you make something that's super long, all of a sudden, like you have to be more mindful of like the amount of roots that are going to be coming up ahead. Whereas if you make something very skinny, its area of impact might be smaller, but it's easier to maintain the road ahead. So that way the structure doesn't stop while you're getting swarmed by the various monsters. And so, monsters, it's a lot of fodder enemies, but then inevitably you'll come up against some boss enemies, which increases the challenge. And yeah, I found I couldn't put this game down over the holiday break, and it's one I wish that I'd come to earlier, but I'm happy to have gotten to spend some time with it all the same.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same for me with Ball Expert. It's like it came so late that it was like, it would have been great to sort of get into this earlier. But yeah, it is interesting how we have these sort of mix up of genres and styles and things like that. I mean, a tower defense game with bullet hell stuff and the roguelike stuff. Yeah, they're all things that sound good together. Like it's just that sort of food theory. It's like, yep, this goes with this goes with this. Why not? Let's try it together. Like, and it's tasty. It's the best way to put it.
Yeah, and if I don't have one myself, but if I had a Steam Deck, this would have been an even bigger problem for me. Which I might not have a Steam Deck, but I do have a phone, which is actually one of the other platforms that I surprisingly spent a lot of time with, and that is because a game that we talked about briefly during our Game of the Year coverage found its way to mobile, which I thought was like a perfect fit. That being Clover Pit, the gambler hell game, if you will, from developer Panic Arcade, which you're quite literally playing a slot machine and you're spinning for your life. And that, the stakes are if you can't deposit a specific amount of cash at the end of 3 turns, the cage that you're standing on falls and you plummet to your death. And so like there's this gambler mentality to everything. The stakes are obviously quite high. But you have these like charms, which are perks basically that can help to multiply your score, which can help you to prolong your life as well as boosting your high score. So this is the exact same game that I played on PC. It's the same exact experience, but now it's, on mobile. And so I spent a lot of time playing this when it was released for Android, and I believe it's half price. So it's $10 on PC. It's $5 on Android. Just make sure that if anybody's going to be checking this out, that you buy the version that is the official Panic Arcade release, because this is one that has had lots of imitators pop up and basically literally steal the artwork and the name and such on the Android store, at least. I can't speak to iOS, but this one was great for playing in the airport. It was great on lots of long car rides to different relatives' houses, and it wasn't feeling very social. This was one that further prolonged my addiction to Clover Pit. Did you have any time to check this one out over the holiday?
No. Like I said, I think I bought it pretty much after you described it on the Game of the Year episodes. And because I didn't really go to my Steam Deck much. And I didn't end up playing, which is just the thing of it. There you go. It's I will have to make time for that. But one addictive bite-sized game at a time, I think, might be the best job.
Yeah, that's a fair shout. That. Not much more to say other than I still highly recommend that game. It's a great time, and I don't think it's quite fair to label it as a time waster, but I think it's one that people might be surprised how much time they spend with it. But I guess the last thing that I had that was a bit of a grab bag was Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2, which is not technically a horror game, but I think like we can make an exception for like Grimdark, the universe of Warhammer 40K being much more horror because of sort of just like the desolate nature of what war in the 40,000 year looks like, right? It's like the notion of fighting against the dying star, fighting against the darkness kind of a thing where, you know, death is inevitable. It's just kind of like prolonging life as much as you can. And I guess all I'll say for this is just like, I didn't play the original and I have a history with 40K. Like I used to play the miniatures game back in the day. But this is just like a phenomenal game in my opinion. You know, it's simplistic to describe in terms of it being just this like third person over the shoulder action game, a lot of hack and slash, some parrying and whatnot. But the scale and the scope again speaks to like Saber Interactive and their publisher Focus Entertainment for this one. Just like being able to fill these expansive worlds with hundreds of enemies on screen at once. And, you know, I'm playing on Series X. I'm playing the disc copy, so that probably has a lot to do with the performance. I haven't had any hiccups in playing this game that at times really does make me just like stop there in awe before I get overwhelmed by the Tyranids, which are like the alienoid hordes. And it is chaotic as hell. It's bloody as hell. And it does a really great job of kind of like, even on the harder difficulty, making you feel like an all-powerful space marine. You're not just like a wimpy soldier. You're this kind of like power soldier and this cybernetic infused humanoid. And you just feel powerful as shit. But at the same time, it is very difficult. And I guess the more horror tinge of it all is just like the body horror nature of naturally the Tyranids, these alienoids, and the sort of like horrific amalgamations that they have. And I have a feeling that some chaos demons of some sort will pop up in the future. But yeah, I was just playing that a lot this week, and I've had a tremendous time with that.
Yeah, I think I played the first one like ages back, and found it quite entertaining for the kind of game it is. But yeah, the scale of it does look much bigger for this one, and like I always, because of the chunky nature of it, obviously it always reminds me of Gears of War stuff. But but obviously, again, with that scale thing, it's a bit different. So it's one I keep looking at in sales and going, like that. I think it's currently, as time of recording, I think about 22 quid on PC, but probably, I don't know. It's one of those I'd want to play on console.
Yes.
But it's like, I mean, I'm not really into Warhammer, but I've enjoyed quite a few games. Like, I mean, I think going back to games that are coming out this year, actually, a sequel to Bolt Gun. I mean, I really enjoyed Bolt Gun as a sort of boomer shooter style thing. So, yeah, there's plenty of stuff in there. And there was that turn-based tactics game as well. I can't remember the name of, which was really good. So, yeah, it's got a cool aesthetic to it. You know, like that universe, especially 40K as well. So, though I will say, walking past a Warhammer store yesterday and seeing that bland ass new logo, it just it's just like I can't believe it's like it's how not to sell a product, I think is the best way to put it.
Again, like my history with 40K is mostly games these days, but even I was just like taken aback by that new logo and whatnot. And like you'd said, this is one that I was eager to check out, but I waited and there was a sale on Amazon, which is, I've seen it for about like $30 here a lot recently. And like you said, digitally at the time of recording, it's marked down to like $20 or something. But so far, really, really enjoying the single player. I know there's a lot of multiplayer content too, akin to like a horde mode almost. And there's like a competitive mode. Just a really, really fucking slick game that, like you'd said, you and I both have a very similar, like sort of mid-range PC, but this is one that I am very satisfied with going with the console version because it is gorgeous and it is buttery smooth, at least on my experience with the Xbox Series X. So yeah, definitely one that I was glad to make some time for, even if it was only recently, but the like 3 hours I've spent with it or 4 hours has been really, really terrific. And, I was talking with somebody recently, just like 40K and Warhammer in general is one of those franchises that it's been great to see so many variations with expanding on it. Like they're not all just first-person shooters, or they're not all just along the Dawn of War RTS line. Like there's a lot of different flavors of the Warhammer and 40K universes here. So like this, and we're even getting, I believe it's this year, Warhammer 40K like Total War, which, you know, there's obviously a Warhammer version of that, but getting to kind of like play Total War with the 40K aspect, I think is going to be terrific. So that's something maybe hopefully I'll be able to get our hands on later this year. But yeah, that's gonna do it for my grab bag. Did you have any last minute ones, or did we touch upon them all?
I think that covers everything.
Yeah. So yeah, that's going to do it for our first episode of the new year. You know, get into chat about some stuff that we played previously, some newer stuff, and you know, as we said, this will be kind of the format moving forwards with Safe Room. And you know, when an anniversary comes up, or there's going to be some huge release like Resi 9, like naturally that's going to dominate the conversation. But in the in between weeks, yeah, we'll be chatting about just like a variety of things that we've been playing that are horror and horror adjacent and whatnot. And naturally, as we said, just to reiterate for people, Horror Bites is going bi-weekly. So after you've listened to this episode, on this week's Thursday, there will be a double-header episode. We'll be taking the following week off from Horror Bites, but you can still get Safe Room's main feed episode on Monday, and then moving forwards with that schedule and so forth. So yeah, for the first time this year, but certainly not the last, my friend, as always, it's a pleasure chatting horror with you for Safe Room.
Back at you, my friend. Until the next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's main feed episode of Safe Room. Please be sure to tune back this Thursday for a new doubleheader episode of Horror Bites, our indie horror showcase, which is now going to be bi-weekly releases. If you've enjoyed our horrifying discussions, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your preferred podcast platform, as this helps us immensely in ensuring that the show continues to grow. For any and all show updates and additional content, you can follow Safe Room on all of our socials, which are linked in the episode notes, at Safe Room Pod. And finally, you can send any and all emails to saferoompod@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.